There are many common motifs, tropes, and themes that appear in old fairy tales. Princesses in need of rescue, dragons in need of slaying, curses to be broken, lessons to be learned, kings and witches, knights and evil stepmothers, talking animals, and treasure, and many more. Such elements are kind of what fairy tales are all about, but these you already know of. One that you may not have heard though is sausages. That's right, sausages. Now many times these aren't even food, but sentient beings, anthropomorphic, akin to a talking bird or even a human. Why sausages? I don't know, because it's German, I guess. The fact that these stories contain sausages isn't really all that important to the narratives themselves, but it is interesting, and today we're going to read 3 of the most famous ones. Our first tale today is not only my personal favorite, but easily the most famous of these sausage stories. It's a banger about a banger, if you will. While it isn't one of the Brothers Grimm's most well-known tales, it isn't entirely unheard of either. In fact, it seems to have had a little surge in popularity in recent times, probably because of how odd it reads in the modern context. We are, of course, talking about The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage, a story about 3 friends whose lives are in for a drastic change when they decide to spice up their routines. There are many versions and iterations of this classic tale, but we will be looking at the most well-known, that written by the Brothers Grimm, first published in 1812. So I now present to you The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Once upon a time, a mouse, a bird, and a sausage formed a partnership. They kept a house together, and for a long time, they lived in peace and prosperity, acquiring many possessions. The bird's task was to fly into the forest every day to fetch wood. The mouse carried water, made the fire, and set the table. The sausage did the cooking. Whoever is too well off always wants to try something different. Thus one day, the bird chanced to meet another bird who boasted to him of his own situation. The bird criticized him for working so hard, while the other 2 enjoyed themselves at home. For after the mouse had made the fire and carried the water, she could sit in the parlor and rest until it was time for her to set the table. The sausage had only to stay by the pot, watching the food cook. When mealtime approached, she would slither through the porridge or the vegetables, and thus everything was greased and salted and ready to eat. The bird would bring his load of wood home. They would eat their meal, and then sleep soundly until the next morning. It was a great life. The next day, because of his friend's advice, the bird refused to go to the forest, saying that he had been their servant long enough. He was no longer going to be a fool for them. Everyone should try a different task for a change. The mouse and the sausage argued against this, but the bird was the master, and he insisted that they give it a try. The sausage was to fetch wood, the mouse became the cook, and the bird was to carry water. And what was the result? The sausage trudged off toward the forest. The bird made the fire, and the mouse put on the pot, and waited for the sausage to return with wood for the next day. However, the sausage stayed out so long that the other 2 feared that something bad had happened. The bird flew off to see if he could find her. A short distance away, he came upon a dog that had seized the sausage as free booty and was making off with her. The bird complained bitterly to the dog about this brazen abduction, but he claimed that he had discovered forged letters on the sausage and that she would thus have to forfeit her life to him. Filled with sorrow, the bird carried the wood home himself and told the mouse what he had seen and heard. They were very sad, but were determined to stay together and make the best of it. The bird set the table while the mouse prepared the food. She jumped into the pot, as the sausage had always done, in order to slither and weave in and about the vegetables and grease them. But before she reached the middle, her hair and skin were scalded off, and she perished. When the bird wanted to eat, no cook was there. Beside himself, he threw the wood this way and that, called out, looked everywhere, but no cook was to be found. Because of his carelessness, the scattered wood caught fire, and the entire house was soon aflame. The bird rushed to fetch water, but the bucket fell into the well, carrying him with it, and he drowned. The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage is the most famous sausage tale by the Grimm brothers, but there is another one that is somewhat well known as well. Not quite as amusing in my opinion, but probably even stranger. It is shorter, but this time we get a thriller about two sausages. I now present to you The Strange Feast by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. A blood sausage and a liver sausage had been friends for some time, and the blood sausage invited the liver sausage for a meal at her house. At dinner time, the liver sausage merrily set out for the blood sausage's house, but when she walked through the doorway, she saw all kinds of strange things. There were many steps, and on each one of them, she found something different. There were a broom and shovel fighting with each other, a monkey with a big wound on his head, and more such things. The liver sausage was very frightened and upset by this. Nevertheless, she took heart, entered the room, and was welcomed in a friendly way by the blood sausage. The liver sausage began to inquire about these strange things on the stairs, but the blood sausage pretended not to hear her, or made it seem it was not worth talking about. Or she said something about the shovel and the broom, such as, "That was probably my maid gossiping with someone on the stairs," and she shifted the topic to something else. Then the blood sausage said she had to leave the room to go into the kitchen and look after the meal. She wanted to check that everything was in order and nothing had fallen into the ashes. The liver sausage began walking back and forth in the room and kept wondering about the strange things until someone appeared. I don't know who it was, and said, "Let me warn you, liver sausage, you're in a bloody, murderous trap. You'd better get out of here quickly if you value your life." The liver sausage did not have to think twice about this. She ran out of the door as fast as she could, nor did she stop until she got out of the house and was in the middle of the street. Then she looked around and saw the blood sausage standing high up in the attic window with a long knife that was gleaming as though it had just been sharpened. The blood sausage threatened her with it and cried out, "If I had caught you, I would have had you." Our final story today is not one written by the Brothers Grimm, but by a predecessor, the great French fairy tale author Charles Perrault. Published in 1697, it predates the Brothers Grimm's Sausage Tales by over 100 years, and indeed Perrault's work was a notable influence on the brothers' works. Unfortunately, this one doesn't feature a anthropomorphic sausage, and actually in some versions black pudding replaces the sausages in the tale. But we of course aren't reading those translations. I now present to you The Ridiculous Wishes by Charles Perrault. There was once a poor woodcutter who, tired of his hard life, longed for rest in the world to come. In his unhappiness, he declared that in all his days heaven had not granted even one of his wishes. One day in the woods, as the woodcutter was complaining of his unhappy lot, Jupiter appeared before him, his thunderbolts in his hands. It would be difficult to picture the terror of the poor man. "I desire nothing," he said, casting himself on the ground. "I will give up my wishes if you, in turn, will give up your thunder." "That's a fair exchange." "Have no fear," said Jupiter. "I have heard your complaints, and I have come to show you how unfairly you judge me. Now listen, I am king of all of the world, and I promise to grant your first 3 wishes, no matter what they may be. See that they make you happy and content, and since your happiness depends on them, think carefully before you make them." With these words, Jupiter returned to the heavens, and the happy woodcutter, taking up his bundle of sticks, hurried to his home. Never had his burden seemed so light. "This is an important matter," he said to himself. "I certainly must have my wife's advice." "Hey, Fanchon," he shouted as he entered his cottage, "let us up a good fire. We are rich for the rest of our lives. All we have to do is make 3 wishes." With this, he told his wife what had happened, whereupon she, in her imagination, began to form 1,000 plans. But realizing the importance of acting prudently, she said to her husband, "Lace, my dear, let us not spoil anything by our impatience. We must think things over very carefully. Let us put off our first wish until tomorrow. Let us sleep on it." "I think you are right," said he. "But first, go draw some of that special wine." On her return, the woodcutter drank deeply and leaned back in his chair before the fire. "To match such a fine blaze," he said, "I wish we had a measure of sausage. It would go very well indeed." Scarcely had he spoken these words when his wife, to her great astonishment, saw a long link of sausage moving over to them like a snake from the chimney corner. She cried out in alarm, but realizing at once that this was the result of the wish which her foolish husband had made, she began to abuse and scold him angrily. "When you might," she said, "have a kingdom with gold, pearls, rubies, diamonds, fine clothes, and all you wish for is a sausage." "Alas," her husband replied, "I was wrong. I made a very bad choice. I admit my mistake. Next time, I will do better." "Yes, yes," said his wife. "I'll repeat it till doomsday. To make such a choice as you did, you must be a donkey." At this, the husband became very angry and almost wished his wife was dead. "Mankind," he said, "is born to suffer. A curse on all this and all sausages. I wish that it was hanging from the end of your nose." The wish was heard at once in heaven, and the sausage fastened itself to her nose. Fanchon had once been pretty, and, to tell the truth, this ornament did not have a very pleasing effect. Since it hung down over her face, however, it interfered with her talking, and this was such an advantage to her husband that he did not think he had wished too badly. "With my remaining wish, I could very well still make myself a king," he said to himself. "But we must think of the queen, too, and her unhappiness if she were to sit on the throne with her new yard-long nose. She must decide which she wants, to be a queen with that nose, or a woodcutter's wife and an ordinary person." Whereupon his wife agreed that they had no choice. She would never have the riches and diamonds and fine clothes she had dreamed of, but she would be herself again if the last wish would free her from the frightful sausage on her nose. And so the woodcutter did not change his lot. He did not become a king. His purse was not filled with gold. He was only too glad to use his remaining wish in restoring his poor wife to her former state. And with that, I hope you enjoyed these 3 sausage tales. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's time to go fire up the grill.